I want to talk about some news a day, starting with what's going on in Indiana and now in Arkansas. What does it say about the two political parties in America and about America in general, how this thing has become such a big deal?
I think it says that one of the parties is moving further and further away from what is the mainstream. The mainstream is moving, and it's losing the Republicans when they take these kind of decisions.
Your party hasn't always supported equal rights for gay and lesbians, right? It's a relatively recent thing. The president came out relatively recently. You came out relatively recently in support of gay marriage. Does that give you some pause in saying that Republicans are behind the times?
No, I would hope that they would all move over and that we all could put this issue behind us and move forward.
By doing what?
By essentially saying that whether you're gay or not should not be subject to discrimination.
Is there any area in which you think gay and lesbians are entitled to exactly the same rights as every other American?
I think they should be married. They should have every other right.
Adoption, everything.
Absolutely.
What caused you to change your view on these issues?
I think I kind of grew up, and like a lot of people, thought that all gays should have the same legal rights, but not marriage, and then realized that I think marriage is part of it, and they should have it.
Last question on this. I'll turn you over to John. Will Republicans pay a political price, Mike Pence and others, Jeb Bush and others, if they don't change on this issue, do you think?
It's hard to say. I think basically yes, because I think the whole electorate has moved. And if they're out of step on this kind of issue, I think it becomes a character question. Of course, they think they have the character issue by taking the position that they take for their primary electorate, but not in a general election.
Okay. John?
Senator Bradley, let me ask you a question about 2016. We're headed into a race that could very well end up with Hillary Clinton as the Democratic nominee, Jeb Bush as the Republican nominee. A couple of noted political scholars like Barbara Bush has suggested in the past that America's got a lot of great families. We don't need any more Bushes. Martin O'Malley the other day said the presidency is not some crown to be passed between two families. You're a great advocate of reform and of opening up the presidential process. How do you feel about the notion that we could end up with a Clinton-Bush race?
Well, when you have a process that's dominated by two parties, you have primaries in each party, and whoever wins, they are the selection of the parties. You can't second guess and say, well, you think there should be somebody else. There is a process for the selection to be made, and it will be Hillary Clinton. It could be Jeb Bush.
Do you feel like there's a certain analogy between this on the Democratic side, what happened with you and back in 2000? You had Al Gore, who was a sort of semi-incumbent challenge from the outside. Do you think there'll be a Democratic challenger to Hillary Clinton who has your kind of stature?
I have no idea, but I know that if somebody's going to run for president, particularly in a race against someone as formidable as Hillary Clinton, or in my case, the Vice President of the United States, that you have to feel it deep in your gut that this is the time for you to do it, for whatever series of reasons.
Should there be a challenger to her?
I'm not to say who there should be a challenger. No, I mean, why not? I mean, there's a challenger. Will it actually succeed? I think it's highly unlikely to succeed. Will it keep her sharp? Will it make her sharper? Possibly.
If you were going to run against her, how would you do it?
I wouldn't run against her.
Why not?
I've been on one suicide mission. I wouldn't take a second one.
Okay. Marco, go ahead. Take it back.
Talk about where we are with Russia. It's something you study pretty closely. There was optimists over the last couple decades would have hoped that Russia would become part of the community of nations and be more of an ally to the United States and have a thriving democracy, thriving economy. How bad is the situation with Russia right now? And is any of the problems with Russia fall at the feet of President Obama and his policies?
Well, I think that we've made mistakes with Russia since the Clinton administration, '94. I think expansion of NATO was a problem. I think Kosovo was a problem. I think that we did things that they asked us not to do, and we did not build a strategic relationship with them. And when Putin went to Munich in 2007 and laid out his disagreements, we didn't take that seriously. And therefore we are where we are today. Ukraine is more central to Russia's interest than it is to the West's interest. And the more we try to debate things like sending military to Ukraine, we split the Western alliance. The Germans don't want that, the French don't want that, the Poles, the Balts do want it. So we have to understand what's at stake here and take the long term. I think President Obama has done well on this. He came after a long period of time where I think the wrong policy was made on Russia, and he tried to reset it. Had some problems. I don't know what their relationship was, Putin and Obama.
Are you saying, given that Russia has a greater interest in Ukraine, that the United States should not try to get Russia out of Crimea, should not try to help the current Ukrainian government?
I'm saying that there can be political help and economic help, but there should not be military assistance.
And if they end up taking over Ukraine, that's fine?
We have to ask ourselves as a country, are we prepared to send our boys and girls to die in Ukraine? I don't think we are. We have to accept certain geopolitical facts.
All right, let's move to some basketball.
So, Senator Bradley, let me ask you, we've heard some political expertise here. Here's another thing you have a lot of expertise on, which is hoops. The Final Four coming up this weekend. I want to ask you who you got in these two games. Talk first about Duke and Michigan State and who you think is going to win and why.
Well, I think Duke will win, and I think Kentucky will probably beat Wisconsin, and Duke might pull an upset.
Wow, that's a pretty dramatic call. Do you not think Wisconsin is maybe the only team in the tournament who has a chance to actually beat Kentucky?
I love the way Wisconsin plays. I love the way they play. The question there will be their center. Can their center be effective against three big guys on the Kentucky team? That's what we don't know. That's what we'll have to see. If he is, they could pull it off.
What's the mental state of this Kentucky team, having come so far undefeated and coming so close to blowing that game against Notre Dame just the other night? Are they now resolved and fired up, or are they shaken?
If they're not fired up, I don't know what the problem is. They're in the Final Four. They could win an NCAA championship. I regret that most of them will be gone next year, and that the system is in 1 year and out, but that's the one it is, and they are where they are, and they have tremendous talent.
Have you seen them a lot this year?
I have not.
They're poised to go undefeated, potentially. Is that something that you think, makes them an all-time great team, regardless of how they'd match up?
Well, anytime you win the NCAA championship and you're undefeated, how can you do better? Sure.
But you haven't seen them enough to know whether
I haven't seen them enough to know, and the comparisons between them and the UCLA teams or whatever, I think are irrelevant, different eras.
How would you rate the sort of place that March Madness now has in the country compared to other sports?
A little bigger than when I was there.
Yeah.
When we went to the Final Four, we were in Portland, Oregon, and we got to our hotel. It was at Howard Johnson. We went into the hotel. There were no beds. There were pull-out sofas. I don't think the Kentucky team will have that issue.
Yeah. I think that's one measure of the change.